You're 61 years old, single, and still working, and you just looked at your 401k and realized that you've lost $400,000. And you may be thinking lots of things right now, but one of those questions that we want to entertain today is, should you use this loss opportunity to convert some of these 401k dollars to a Roth position? That's what we're going to look at in our video today. Hello, my name is John Vandergriff. I'm one of the owners and wealth planning team lead here at Blue Ridge Wealth Planners, where we help people create plans to make the transition from working to retirement, or if they get to retirement and have not done effective planning yet, build a baseline plan so that we can move forward and really not miss many of the things that we need to plan for. One of those areas that we see often overlooked is the realm of tax planning. And so we're going to go into that in a little bit more detail today. But as you look at this, if you don't feel like you've had adequate conversations yet about taxes and tax planning, you see a link here. At any time you can click that, schedule a time with one of our wealth planners. We'd be happy to sit down and see if some of the things we're going to look at in this video could be applicable to you. And with that being said, I always like to kind of start with two things here. First, if you would like, share, subscribe this video. If you've got comments or questions, please put those below. We'll make sure that we see those and look to respond. But then also with this is a very particular set of circumstances. This may be very similar to situation or not. Make sure that you have all the information you can get from your CPA and consult with a tax planning professional so that you're in a position to know everything you need to know, because your situation may be similar to this, but not just like it. So with that being said, 61 years old, single and working, $400,000 of losses in my 401k, should I convert to a Roth position? And as we said, there's more than just looking at the taxes that go into this, although that is a big focus today. Where we're going to look at is combining really tax planning, the income that we have now versus later, and then also the investments from a loss perspective to see if we can, have a silver lining there and take advantage of a loss that we incurred recently. So single, 61-year-old, $900,000 was what they used to have in their 401k 6 months ago. $500,000 in 401ks now. So we're in very aggressive positions where they lost almost half of their money over a 6-month time frame, which you say, how could somebody do that? Happens more than you think. So again, we've got that, but we've also got $200,000 in banks or non-qualified money that we could use to pay taxes on a conversion if we decide to do that. This particular person's working 5 more years. Their income at retirement will be $125,000. And for this particular situation, as we look at some of the details, you said they're at an annual income need of 80 today. So you say, well, how are they going to live on 80 when they're going to get 125 of income later? This is a very common scenario that we see where what happened is this person is really not retired, but they're working part-time, getting consulting pay of $80,000 a year. Once they make the jump to retirement, they're going to be getting a pension and Social Security income that's going to be more than what they need. So as we said, that 125 of income, which we'll look at later as we start to look at income decisions now versus in retirement. So with $80,000 of taxable income as a single person, top tax rate is 22%. And then as we look at this, savings and pre-tax accounts, $500,000 now, after tax at $200,000, and then tax-free at $0. So we're going to look at this situation and say, based on where our income is now versus where it will be later, and again, sometimes the rule of thumb is income lower now than it is later, Roth Conversion's automatic. That's not necessarily true for every situation, but we're going to look at the details here. And so before we dig into the actual numbers, we need to understand more about how Roth Conversions work, because if you have tax-deferred dollars in IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, TSPs, any of those tax-deferred positions, moving money out of that, no matter where it goes, as long as it's not another tax-deferred position, that is going to be a taxable event to you. So whether you consume it or invest it either after tax or in a Roth position, that's going to be a taxable event for that tax year. Now the Roth, if you choose to go that route, needs to be in place for 5 years before you have completely tax-free distributions. You've got tax-free growth, but the distributions coming out, you have to wait until after 5 years. And then if you do your conversion under the age of 59 and a half, you have a 5-year waiting period before the principal is available without penalty. If over 59.5, your principal is available during that 5-year waiting period since you've already paid the tax on it, but any growth that's taken out would be taxable to you if you were to consume that. So we also have to look at whether moving from a 401k or tax deferred position makes sense based on what we need to evaluate from a tax perspective. So again, looking at this, I'm going to take a round number of $100,000. Let's just look at whether we decide to leave that in the 401k or make a conversion of that money into a Roth position. We need to look down the line and see what are the impacts of this decision, not just today, but in the future. So again, with a 401k, you've got $100,000. If you leave it in the 401k, no tax bill is due now because you're still growing tax deferred. So you've got $100,000 there. Roth conversion takes place. It's going to matter what your current tax bill, top tax bill is. So if 22% is what that bot is and you pay it out of these dollars, then it's going to be $78,000 that starts the Roth position growing forward. And so some advisors will see at least this much of the conversation and say, this is why we don't recommend doing Roth conversions, because if the market goes up 10% the next year, this side's going to make 10, this side will make 7,800. That's making you less money, which again is true from a math perspective, but not looking at the same buckets, because this is fully taxable growth. This is tax-free as long as we play by the rules the government has in place. So let's look at this further down the line, since we still have a completely taxable bucket versus a tax-free, to where we get to the bottom line after we pay out what is owed. What are we looking at? So the Roth position doubles to $156, the IRA doubles to $200,000. So let's say we go to take money out, and assuming that this is longer than 5 years, there is no taxes owed on the growth or distribution of the Roth. The IRA is still fully taxable, or 401k. So we've got to look at this and see if now is the best time. So let's assume that you go and you start taking money out and the tax rates have not changed. What you will notice is that your bottom line in both of these scenarios is actually the same. If it costs you 22% at the end, the same as the beginning, your bottom line numbers will be exactly the same. Now, the way we have been trained to approach retirement is that our income will be lower in our retirement years than when we're working. And so if that's the case, you don't want to make a decision to do a Roth conversion, because if our income drops, even though you're growing in a taxable bucket, you're going to have more money at the end of the day by pushing to the time that you can pay the least taxes. As we look at this, though, with the rapid amount of spending that's happening in Washington, as well as a large amount of debt that we're incurring, I don't think that's likely for most of the people we're talking to today, especially if their income stays the same or potentially goes up when they're forced to take distributions from their IRAs and 401ks through RMDs. And if that's the case and they jump from a 22% to a 30%, then that means they're going to have less money at the end of the day when taxes go up in the future. So again, the whole deal that we're looking at is, when can you pay the lowest percentage tax? Is it now or is it later? And since we can't see the future, but we can look at history as a guide, we need to examine all the factors on the table to see if we can make a good decision here. And if we feel like our income is going to be, as we look at it in this example, $80,000 now versus $125,000 at minimum in perpetuity, most people would suggest that to be a good time to do a conversion. When you factor in losses on the account, that makes it an even better scenario to do conversions at. So as we look at this scenario, let's assume that we've got Roth conversions that take place at a loss. So you got $100,000 that the value was 6 months ago at 24% taxes. That would be $24,000 of tax. If you had a stock that dropped 20% over that time to $80,000, still keeping the same amount of shares, you do that same conversion, then the tax bite to you is a little less than $5,000 less, even though you're converting the same number of shares just 6 months later at a lower share price. So effectively what's happening is you're taking basically the same pot of money, but you're paying less taxes on it to get it in the Roth position. If that account recovers back to $100,000, inside of the Roth you would have tax-free growth versus doing nothing and having taxable return back to the $100,000 value that you have. So as we look at this, this really works well, especially if we can pay these taxes from after-tax money, leave this invested where it is and allow that value to climb back up over time. So as we look at this, Roth conversions happening at a loss, ideally you would be able to do all your conversions there. When we look with clients on an annual basis, sometimes we bias toward money that's lost more just so that we can get more return on the value or more value for the tax dollar that we're paying for in that particular situation. All right, so as we look at this, we need to see where this person is today versus where they will be later. As we said, with $80,000 of income, they're at the 22% with their top dollar now. What you will notice is once their income goes up at retirement time to 125, they'll cross into the 24% bracket with no changes to the tax code. So that would be an increase. If nothing changes by the time we get to 2026, this will be the tax brackets. And again, these are adjusted from 2017 to today for inflation. So if they're at 125, instead of being at the 22% bracket that they're at now, which becomes 24, they would jump from the 25 to the 28. So again, a percentage increase on there. And then the concern is that our situation is bad enough where we need to bring about tax reform across the board. And if that happens, we look back to 1981, which was the last time taxes were noticeably higher. And you will see that at $80,000 of income today, they would be taxed at 30% with their top dollar. And if they go up to 125, they would go up to 44%. So almost a 50% increase just from this really high number that we're already looking at. So as we look here, again, I think this particular situation, looking at their starting distribution, we're at 22 versus 25 versus 30. If we look at both the retirement income, but then also the impact of RMDs, if there's no conversion done and we've got $500,000 of money making 6% for the next 14 years, because again, this person doesn't need this money, so they could be more aggressive with it. Showing a conservative return over that time, getting this bucket to make money, the RMDs due at that point would be another $45,000. So that would push their income to $170,000. And as we look at this, the 125 would be at 24, 28, and 44, but every dollar of RMD would be taxed on top of these figures going up. So again, as we look at this, I think no question in this particular situation, it makes sense to do a conversion. Now we want to do something a little differently than we have done it. What happens if this person decides, I just want to be done with thinking about taxes? How much is it going to cost me to convert every penny of this? Well, because they're 61, they don't have to factor in Medicare as a cost to this equation because that doesn't come into play until age 63. So looking at this, if they wanted to just pay all the taxes on this at once, you'd have $29,000 at 22, $86,000 at 24, $49,000 would happen at 32, and then the bulk of this would happen at 35. So we're looking at an effective tax rate of 32%. But going back to our chart here, the starting place for their income in each of these scenarios is not far off from what it would take to pay the taxes on the entire thing. And if this particular situation could pay those taxes from after-tax money, which would be in the ballpark of $160,000, this scenario has $200,000 of after-tax money, then they're able to get tax-free growth treatment on this the 5 years that they're still working. The day they hit retirement, they now have a tax-free bucket that's available to them for whatever purpose they would like. And that's one way that you get the government's hand out of your savings by going ahead and settling up and paying those taxes. So rarely do we make this decision to do the entire thing. You can look on here and say, well, if we wanted to max out at 24, how much are we able to do? But sometimes it's worth looking at the math just to see if we settled up entirely and did that while it's at a loss position, we're getting tremendous value from what used to be $900,000. We're now paying those taxes at $500,000, and then any run up in value that we get from that point forward, you keep it because you've already paid the taxes. So as you look at this, you may be like, well, I don't know if I want to convert the whole thing. Like I said, rarely do we recommend that, but we need to be looking at things like this to see how we can maximize the savings that you put away to this point and help get the government's hand out of your pocket where they don't reach deeper at the wrong time. Wrong time being where tax increase happens and you owe more than you ever thought possible. So if someone's not had at least this much of a tax discussion with you, give us a chance to see if we can help you in this regard. Like we've helped a lot of families here in East Tennessee, families that are retiring. We would love the chance to help you in that same way. So you see a link below here. You can schedule a phone call, a virtual meeting, or if you're within driving distance of Tennessee, we'd love to sit down with you in person. But let us see if we can help you make good, efficient decisions to try to keep as much of the money that you have today. And especially if we're in a loss position, try to maximize how much benefit those losses can actually give you. So thank you for joining us. Hopefully you learned something today. If you have some comments, please share those below. Make sure you subscribe to our channel so that you can get more information just like this. But as far as this video goes, that's all I have to share. We look forward to seeing you next time.